Time is the latest film made by Disney and director Ava DuVernay based off of the book of the same name, and it's a film made for children and people who are children at heart. You're able to have fun with the movie like that, and if you don't have fun with the movie, then you're just an evil, joyless cynic who should not have seen the movie. This movie is about Meg Murray, played by Storm Reid, who has lost her father, played by Chris Pine, at a very young age. He was experimenting with this idea of tessering, or wrinkling time and space to be able to get to wherever you want in the universe. But one day, when Meg goes outside, these three people, Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Which, and Mrs. Who, are in the backyard, and they talk about how her father may still be out there, and how she needs to accompany them to go on this mission through planets and other galaxies with her friend Calvin and younger adopted brother Charles Wallace. I wasn't really that excited for this movie. The trailers looked fine, you know, but they just didn't really seem like it was going to be this next big thing for Disney, at least. But I kind of figured going in, like, it's from the director Ava DuVernay, who really wowed a lot of people with Selma a couple years back. So I was kind of thinking, like, okay, trailers didn't impress me, but I'm at least kind of expecting a visually stunning film with some good direction from her and some pretty good performances, I assume, because this movie does have a pretty good cast with it. Unfortunately, though, I walked out of this film hating it more than I expected it to. In fact, you could say that this film is a little embarrassing. Almost as embarrassing as walking to high school when all of a sudden your crush walks up to you with her boyfriend hand in hand and asks you who do you like now in an attempt to kind of catch up, and then I have to say no one to try to cover up the fact that I feel so much pain and agony staring at you two being happy and in love, but that's besides the point. I'm getting off on a tangent there. You might be wondering, what kind of embarrassing am I talking about? Is it anything specific like editing or filmmaking wise or acting wise? It's kind of just a culmination of certain embarrassing moments. Like, for instance, there's a few editing choices that I thought were really just kind of inept. Like, really inept editing choices that really did not help any of the scenes and also does not overall help the flow of the film. I was watching the film, and instead of feeling like I was going along for a journey with these characters I liked, I felt like the movie was just kind of jumping from one place to the next, and then we gotta go here now just cuz, and now we gotta go here because, just cuz. And this movie also doesn't really do a good job with the characters. Like, Meg Murray, played by Storm Reid, is supposed to be this character who you really feel for because she lost her dad and she's wanting to find him for years now, and sure, they mentioned that that's the motivation, so it's there, but performance-wise, I don't really think Storm Reid was that up to par with that, and she was fine in the movie. Like, she's definitely better than a lot of other child actors out there, but when you have her in these fantastical places, this like CGI backdrop and all these beautiful things, and you're expecting this kind of like, oh my god, this is beautiful, like kind of reaction from her, and instead it's just a, wow! And it's like, oh, you don't really seem amazed, you just kind of seem like, oh, this is cool. Like, maybe just a little bit more there. And especially her young adopted brother Charles Wallace, who they constantly, throughout the movie, call Charles Wallace. They don't say Charles or Charlie, it's always Charles Wallace. Why? Why is that a thing? Why can't you just call him Charles? That got so annoying after a while. Everyone just calls him Charles Wallace. But why? He's a young kid, and I don't mean to be mean, but Jesus Christ, I couldn't stand him. Could not stand this kid, especially because in one part of the movie he has to change from this kind of whimsical Disney kid personality to over-the-top kind of thing. I don't really want to spoil it, but it's really over-the-top and corny, and he cannot pull it off. A lot of people were saying like, oh, that was cute and entertaining. I don't get it. I was honestly cringing so hard at a lot of his scenes, and when that change happens that, from a narrative point of view, I still don't really thoroughly understand, it's so bad, it's so poorly handled. It's even a worse performance than Levi Miller's in this film, and Levi Miller, I didn't really like him in the film Pan, and Better Watch Out, which came out like last year, not a big fan of his performance in that either. Carries on in this film. Like, this kid, I swear, he's pumping out these just kind of mediocre, boring performances that I could care less about, and I hope he has a good future someday. I hope he has this one project where it's like springboarding him into another level of acting, but this kind of performance is not helping him. He came across as so bland, and it doesn't help that he's playing a love interest for no reason. He basically gets involved with the plot because he was walking down the street and he walked up to them at just the right moment. Like, that's it. Like, that's it. There's nothing else to it. You might be expecting, well, maybe the ladies in this movie are gonna be really good, right? Oprah Winfrey is a good actress, and she's obviously really popular, but when she showed up in this movie, especially her character, I felt so embarrassed. Not just because the costume just looks so goofy and ridiculous, but she shows up like a Transformer-sized Oprah just shows up because they mention, oh, there was a problem with her Tesser, so she's giant. And I thought, oh my god. But then I also thought, well, maybe this is gonna lead to like some funny jokes about like how big she is later on. But then like 10 minutes later, they test her again and she's just back to normal. And it's like, oh, I'm fine now. Like, oh, you just messed up beforehand, but now you got it under control. Like, they did another Tesser in between where she was still giant, but then they do another one and then she's fine. They don't really even explain it either. It's just kind of like, oh, you're normal size now. Alright, let's move on with the plot. Like, no attempt to explain that. And maybe it's explained in the book, but if you know me, I have not read this book. I read books. I haven't read every single book, and I have not read A Wrinkle in Time. So if it was explained in the book, maybe they should have done a better job of adapting the source material to the big screen. Or maybe not doing it at all, because this is not their first attempt at adapting this, because they did it with the Disney Channel original film several years ago, and apparently that wasn't well received either. Yet, even though people were constantly trying to tell them, it's unfilmable, don't do it, they did it again anyways. Reese Witherspoon, a lot of people were saying she adds a lot of heart and energy to the film. I didn't really feel it. I thought she was honestly a little annoying. Got on my nerves quite a bit. Mindy Kaling as Mrs. Who, I guess you could say is my favorite out of the Mrs. in this movie, because she doesn't turn into a 20-foot version of herself like Oprah did, and there's not an awkward scene where a kid brushes up against her giant face, which actually happens. They're like flying, and because Oprah's right there, Charles Wallace like does like a graze on her chin, and it's like, what the frick is that? Like, why'd you do that? That's so weird! It's not even really that charming. Like, if it was like some creature, like this beautiful like alien maybe, then yeah, but it's just Oprah. It's a human who's giant. Why would you do that? And Mindy Kaling also didn't have the kind of humor of Reese Witherspoon, but at the same time, she's quoting people. Like, her thing is that she quotes people, and it's like, okay, that's kind of neat, but then as the film progresses, they mention like, oh, she can't do that anymore. And it's like, but why? And the reason they give to explain that, it just kind of felt like maybe it should be like reversed, like because of this she starts quoting people because she can't use her own words. It just kind of felt like, well, we can't quote anyone else anymore, but like we ran out of famous quotes we know, so we're just gonna write in dialogue now for her. Another thing that really let me down as far as character goes is that there isn't a villainous character. That's just this giant storm cloud called the It, as they refer to it, which has a voice, but there's no face, there's no personality, there's no character, it's just this cloud of negativity and it's gonna eat us all or something. And it's like, I prefer a villain with like actual motivation, I prefer a villain with a personality, some charm, and instead, the storm cloud, it's gonna eat us, and we have to defeat it with love. Love conquers all, which is the theme of the movie, and it sucks so bad. There's only one performance that I really liked in this film, and that is from Chris Pine playing Meg's dad. His presence actually added a lot of warmth and heart to the film whenever he's interacting with the family. And there's even one moment where I was actually kind of like, oh, that's really sweet, that's a really nice moment. So besides Chris Pine, there was really no character that I was getting like anything out of at all. Like, Rowan Blanchard shows up, the girl from Girl Meets World, and she's the typical high school bully who has a posse. She's like a supervillain, but then later on, oh, you should feel bad for her because she feels like insecure about herself. Like, no, stop! You can't turn someone into a high school supervillain and then be like, oh, we'll feel sympathetic now. You also have Zach Galifianakis showing up as the happy medium, and I thought, oh, maybe he's gonna have some funny jokes. Not only did he not have any funny jokes, but he's also barely in the movie, so why cast Zach Galifianakis? I don't know. And then there's another scene where Michael Pena shows up as this red-eyed dude, and I thought, oh, okay, let's see what he has to do. Didn't say anything funny, and then just disappeared like 2 minutes later. And the reason why he disappears, don't ask me, I don't fully understand it. What he does to affect the plot, also don't fully understand it. Like, this movie is bafflingly confusing for a family film that they're trying to promote, like, it's just a fun time, kids are gonna love it. I was confused by a lot of the stuff they had to offer here with the story. Like the things that they barely explained too did not help that. Actually, there's one thing I should take back about Michael Pena, is that he did tell one joke that I thought was funny, but it's probably not because of what the filmmakers were intending. And I won't spoil it because you just kind of have to hear it, but when I said a character's name earlier, you probably will be able to connect the dots. There's a Family Guy joke in this movie. And I don't know if it was intentional. I chuckled, but then I thought, I have no idea if this is an intentional laugh from Ava DuVernay, or if she just did not know that the joke that Michael Pena just told is kind of a famous running gag on Family Guy. Other than that one joke where I don't even know if it was intentional or not, the film's humor fell flat in so many areas. There's so many like whimsy, like cutesy kind of joke moments, and I was not a fan of any of that. But you might be wondering, okay Jackson, you weren't a fan of the characters, weren't a fan of the humor, you thought the story was a little confusing and the narrative was choppily edited and unfocused, but how did you feel about the visual effects? Because that's another thing that's being talked up, because in the trailers they're just putting all this beautiful imagery in, and on its own, when there's no humans in sight, it looks very beautiful. Like, the work they put into it looks very good. However, you put the humans in, all of a sudden, the green screen becomes very noticeable. All of a sudden, it goes from, like, what could pass as a beautiful animated film turns into the live-action film with beautiful CG and the green screen, and it's so bad at that point, because the humans don't feel like they are interacting with this world. It feels like they're on a soundstage and they're looking around at this green screen, and they're like, oh, wow, this is great. And there's like no real other extra emotion to that. There's a few other visual moments that I thought were cool, just like set-wise, not CGI-wise. And there's one camera shot involving a crowded beach. Won't say anything else other than that, but from that shot I was like, whoa, that kind of tripped me up a bit. Like, that's an excellent shot. But other than that one shot, there's no other trippy moments like that. So I was just kind of watching this film, hoping for something else visually to pop up to gain my interest, but every time I thought, hey, there's something, the humans would walk on screen, and all of a sudden I'd notice the little blue lines around their hair and on their body, like, oh, they're in front of the green screen. Woohoo! And in this case, it's not really about the visual effects artists and what they created, because as I said, on its own, gorgeous. But when you incorporate the live action stuff at this point, I think what we have here is a director who doesn't really know how to incorporate the live action stuff and blend it naturally with all the fake CG. And this is no offense to Ava DuVernay personally, because I know that she made Selma, and that's a critically acclaimed movie. Everyone's wowed by that. She also made a documentary. I didn't see it, but I heard more critical praise for that. She's also set to direct the next DC movie, New Gods, so I wish her all the luck for that. But I feel like this project right here may not have been the best use for her. Maybe big budget stuff isn't for her, because you have this $100 million project, these visual effects, these actors, these great actors, playing these characters that really need to work, because if it doesn't, it's gonna come across as a confusing, embarrassing mess of a film. And although there are a few things in there that are done very well, overall though, I am watching a film and I'm feeling like the director may not have known what to do with this big money all of a sudden, and thought, well, this'll work, right? But then it doesn't really work out in the way that they were expecting it to. It's kind of like how I feel with the third act of Black Panther, whereas the first two acts are really solid and really well done, but then the third act kicks in, and that's when the CG kind of starts to take over, and it's not really that good of CG, and it starts to take me out of the movie. Except take that third act of Black Panther, stretch it out into a full movie, and it's A Wrinkle in Time. I'm gonna give A Wrinkle in Time a D+. Besides Chris Pine adding in that extra warmth with the family connection, besides a few visual effects moments and some camera work, this film is a confused mess that I can't really see a lot of kids really getting behind on a, like, actual level. Maybe they'll enjoy it because they're kids and that's what they're supposed to do, but as far as, like, actually understanding what's going on in the story, I'm not so sure, because I had a hard time understanding as the film progressed. It's honestly a more confusing narrative than Annihilation, and that film was made to be confusing. There are a few performances that I thought were fine, but nothing that really elevated the characters. There's also performances that I just straight up did not like. There's visual effects moments that look so fake, and it honestly is hard to believe that it cost $100 million, because it feels like just some newbie was plucked off the street and was like, hey, you can direct a movie, right? Here, direct this big budget one, incorporate all the visual effects into live action, it'll work perfectly. And they're just like, I think I did it right. But of course, for any fans of the book out there, you might enjoy this film if you're a big fan and you understand already what's going on. But at the same time, film and books, they're two different mediums. If you're going to adapt a book, you have to make sure that it works for the film. If you're just making it so, hey, you read the book, you'll enjoy the movie because you get it, and you're just kind of excluding everyone else who doesn't know about the book and wants to just see it in the movie format, then you didn't do a good job of adapting it. And hiding behind the excuse of, oh, it's just a fun time, just watch it and have fun, don't think about it too much, and saying that if you don't like it, you're a cynic, that's not a valid excuse. It seems like you're hiding something. And after I saw the movie, I was like, yeah, they definitely said that because they knew what they had here, which is a muddled mess. But if you've seen A Wrinkle in Time, leave in the comments below of what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.